So today I am going to cover the following things with you. Okay, so there's 10 specific things that I want to talk through, and it's a lot of information. Okay, now the purpose of the session is that I'm going to be talking about Microsoft Teams, but I'm actually going to be talking about SharePoint. Okay, so I want to talk about the SharePoint storage. We're going to touch on permissions. Oh no. And then, of course, version histories. I want to talk about the library sync. We're going to talk about alerts, the recycle bin, of course, the SharePoint Home site app, as well as the home page to your SharePoint site. I do want to talk a bit about web parts and other apps that can be added. And then, of course, last but not least, I will touch on Microsoft lists as well. Now, I think anyone who's in the session is going to say, oh my word, why do we want to know about those things? We know about those things, okay? Because maybe other people need to know this. So maybe you know this, but does the people around you know this? Does your fellow employees know this? I think as a trainer, I am always constantly reminded that the most difficult thing is that I have to teach people things that I've already forgotten, okay? So to have that empathy to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that we sharing the baseline knowledge that everyone should know, I think is very important. So maybe you do know these things, but maybe it can be a great reminder for you to go back to your company and say, wait a minute, maybe everyone else doesn't know this, okay? So I do hope that it can help you in that regard. So the first thing I am going to touch base on, okay, is the SharePoint site collection, okay? Now, I know everyone just talks Teams, but the old, like, I don't know, the old folk like me are still like SharePoint diehards. But just for some fun, and you're welcome to take a screen grab of that, but it was the funniest thing ever, is that when Teams came out, we all knew, okay, it's SharePoint, okay? We all knew this. And well, maybe everyone didn't know this, but a bit of a tongue in the cheek. I was so happy to see some focus actually going back to SharePoint again, and that sounds maybe a bit strange, but that was a great moment for me to see that we can put a spotlight on the old superhero again. And without going into too much detail, SharePoint had quite a history, okay? It had its 20th birthday party a while ago. We all got together in some virtual crazy like party room and celebrated it. And I think of the history and of the timeline, I do think what's very important is that a big impact for me over the timeline of SharePoint, of course, was when Microsoft Teams, and now, of course, as well, Microsoft Lists was brought into the mix. I think for many years, people struggled with SharePoint adoption. I don't think it was fair. I never struggled with SharePoint adoption, so it's not me, it's obviously them. But I do think that Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Lists is going to make a huge change for us when it comes to using these technologies. Now, as I get started, okay, that's a very busy slide, and I'm also famous for very busy slides, okay, lots of information. When a team is created, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background, people, and our users are not knowing this. I mean, from a technical or admin point of view, you might know that there's a Microsoft 365 group, okay, that's created. It's used for your permissions and a lot of other cool things, okay? And it also helps us. It's like a rental agent that pulls all those resources together for you. And coming from Teams, it's going to make sure that I have a SharePoint site collection behind it for my storage. So where my documents and things are going to be loaded, okay? I've got access to my other online storage as well. I've got a shared mailbox and a shared calendar. Of course, I can tap into like Yammer communications. I've got the Skype icon there because, yes, Skype for Business got rebuilt inside of Teams, better forever, okay? And then, of course, we can tap into the Power Platform as well. We can look at Microsoft Lists. We've got a shared, like a OneNote that is deployed. We can add a planner to the existing Microsoft 365 group. Other websites and tools can add forms and stream and, oh my word, Sway. And then, of course, the whole like employee side of it as well. I love using the WhoBot, but also being able to figure out who people are in the company. And then last but not least, the co-authoring with Office is unbelievable in Teams, okay? So when that team gets created, and it takes a split second to create that team called Teams Nation 2021, there's a gazillion things that happens in the background. And I do think that it's important for your for your team members to know this as well. I do not believe in the concept of, we won't tell them because they don't need to know, because believe me, that's why this world is in such trouble, because we don't tell people the things that they actually need to know. Okay, so please take note, very important, behind your Microsoft team there's a SharePoint site collection linked to that team, and that's where your documents, etc. will be stored. Okay, so if I'm in my team, and I did everything with slides, by the way, so we can share the slide deck afterwards as well. I decided not to do demos. I get into trouble with demos because I've got dodgy friends that sends me emails and does things in my teams while I'm busy working. So I like completely decided to go screenshots on this baby, and I think it's safer. But if I'm in my Microsoft team, if I stand on a channel, I can click on files and then go to open in SharePoint, and it actually opens up the SharePoint site for me behind it. What is important for you to know, and many people miss this, is that it'll open up in the folder of the channel that you were standing on. It doesn't open up the site from the front, it just opens it in that folder for the channel that you were in. So that's important to know, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Then, of course, this SharePoint site collection has a homepage, like SharePoint site collections do. Pretty looking team site that you can use for other things as well. So behind that team, we have a beautiful SharePoint site collection that catches all the documents for us, but can also be used to do so much more. Okay. Now, what's important to know about those channels of yours, I believe in the magic rule of 7. If you've never heard of that, go read up about it, or if I have time afterwards, I'll share a URL. But the magic rule of 7, well, it's actually between 5 and 9, but they kind of decided on 7, means that your brain can remember certain pockets of knowledge before it gets hazy. Okay, mine gets hazy these days after 3, but I think that's age, and this whole lockdown thing has made me a bit gray in the head. But the more channels you have, the more difficult it is for people to actually categorize content. Okay, less is more, people. So those channels that get created in your team creates folders in SharePoint. Okay, so it creates folders to capture and to store all that documents that gets loaded inside of your teams. So that's very important to know, is that the channels that gets created creates folders in the documents library inside of the Microsoft team. Now, while we're on that, I'm going to have something to say about private channels. Can I? I'm not the biggest fan. Okay, and I think it's because people are using them as a rule and not as an exception. I'm quite okay with it being used as exceptions, but I think it's being overused, and I don't think people understand the impact of private channels. It's very important for you to know that when a private channel is created, it creates an additional SharePoint site collection. Oh my word. And sometimes for like 1 or 2 documents, I'm like, what are we doing here, people? So that separate private channel creates a separate SharePoint site collection, different URL, everything, people. So before you create a private channel, please just think through it a little bit. Maybe that private channel that you're creating, and then there's another team with a private channel, is the same audience. Maybe it's the management team. So why don't you just create a team for management team and then put that content in there? It's my personal opinion. I'm not a fan, okay? It should be used for exceptions, not as the rule. So please be careful of private channels. Don't just create them like, I don't know, Smarties. Smarties is like M&Ms in South Africa. So very important for me. Then if I look at the next slide, also very important around your channels, okay? When a channel is deleted and when a channel is renamed, it doesn't do that in SharePoint. You need to know this. It doesn't go and rename it in SharePoint, and it doesn't delete it in SharePoint. So be careful of renames and of deletes. Okay, plan that a little bit better. Move the content first. If you want to recreate a new channel, I would not rename channels unless there's so much communications in there that's so valuable you can't lose it. If not, move the documents, create a new channel, delete the channel in Teams, delete the channel in the folder in SharePoint. So that doesn't go back to SharePoint, and there's good reasons for it, which I'm not going to get back into now, but it doesn't rename and delete on the SharePoint side. So please be aware of that, because it can cause a lot of confusion for your end users that might be working on both sides. Now that's all about the SharePoint site collection. So let's do a recap. There is a SharePoint site collection behind your team. Boom. Most users don't know that. Crazy. Okay. Each channel is a folder in the document library. Private channels creates a new SharePoint site collection. Please use them as the exception, not as the rule. A channel deleted or renamed does not apply to SharePoint. Okay. So Next up, I was just checking. I saw a video come up on the screen and I wasn't sure whether I'm still presenting. I just wanted to make sure that I'm still presenting in this session as well. The next topic that I want to go through is permissions. Okay, now, I think permissions has made me drink way more wine in my life and gone grey overnight than I should have. But of course, that's the life we live in. So let's talk about permissions. Okay. If I, without getting too technical about this, there is a Microsoft 365 group like linked to your team, okay? And that also, think of the older security group that we used for permissions, or the SharePoint permissions group. So that's also where the member sits in. Now, you can create Microsoft 365 groups from various areas, not just those. Those are just some of the collaboration platforms, but you can create them from different areas, and depending on where it gets created from, it does different things, okay? So depending on what resources you need. But that group like manages your permissions as well, okay? So in the tenant, in your tenant admin, you'll also see those groups. It's like the old security groups, if you think of it. So that group that gets added then has members and owners in it. So I always suggest that each team should have 2 owners and the rest should be members, okay? And the reason why I say this is because I still want to win the lottery and buy another 150 motorcycles and run away, and then I hope that there's other owners on the teams of which I was an owner on, because I'm not going back to the office, okay? If I win that lottery, I'm a goner. I'm going to change my name, buy gazillions of motorcycles, and I'm gone. So to make sure that you can do a handover, or there's knowledge transfer, or that someone else can help with it as well, always make sure that if possible that there's more than one owner. Now, if you go on the team and you go to manage team, you will see that it shows you in the team who the members and owners are, but also if you navigate to SharePoint, it shows you 3 distinct groups, which as SharePoint people we're used to: my members, my owners, and my visitors. And you need to know that all the owners and members in your team is added to the members group on SharePoint. They can edit, delete lists, view, add, update, edit, delete list items and documents. So those members in your team can also create apps and delete apps on the SharePoint site, okay? Do not mess with those permissions. So as much as I might have scared you now, don't mess with those permissions. I'd rather do things differently. So very important, you have owners versus members, and something that owners can also do, and I know that people don't like it when I say this, but I do it, okay? When people haven't had sufficient training, I tend to go change the permissions for the members. So I don't allow them to create channels or to add tabs and things. I want the team collectively to decide on the information architecture of the team, because otherwise it's going to become chaos, okay? If everyone creates channels and everyone creates tabs, it's chaos. So I'd rather do that collectively as a team. And then, of course, you can go and change any of those permissions that you feel that you want to change, okay? And for me, that's linked to training. If someone has had decent training, then by all means, let them be able to do what they have to do. Now, let's do a recap on the permissions. Owners and members can edit and delete everything, okay? So now, calm down. Owners can change members' permissions. And then please, please, please do not mess with the permissions on the SharePoint side. Just don't. Just don't, okay? We can have an offline discussion on social media about this if you want to. Now, the next thing I want to get to is version history. I'm going to first take a sip of my coffee so I can slow down and everyone can catch up. Okay, let's talk about version history. Now that everyone's scared about permissions and knowing what permissions does, let me show you how you can manage that risk. The SharePoint library behind your team, that document library is set by default to store 500 electronic versions, okay? So 500 electronic versions, and that can be upped, by the way. So don't do it for all, but in certain instances, I do up it. So you can make that higher, up to 50,000 versions. I wouldn't do it for all, but for example, for like compliance and legal, I normally just up it because maybe they've had 503 edits on a document and now they don't have those last 3 versions, okay? So you can change the permission numbers on the SharePoint side. I'll show you that in a moment. You can't currently see the versions in Teams, okay? And I'm pretty sure I'm saying currently because I'm going to keep on begging and we'll have it there soon. But if you navigate to the SharePoint side, you can click on the ellipsis next to the document and then see the versions. And of course, you can restore versions as well. So if someone's made a mess of a document or someone's deleted a tab out of Excel, you can restore a version. Now, as mentioned, that version history on that document library on the SharePoint side, okay, if you go to version settings on the library settings, you can change that to 50,000, okay? I wouldn't do that for all, but for like compliance and legal type of things, I normally look at the versions and change that. So please take note of that. I think what's great about the versions is that it's great and it's a problem if people don't know. If I load a document with exactly the same name in the same location, it will replace the document as a version. It's nice because it actually tells you that it does it, and it asks you, can I replace it? But that's the good thing because it builds an electronic version. So if you do want a unique document, so maybe every Monday they've got to load the latest register and you don't want that to be one document, then they need to use a unique name. And when it comes to unique names, I normally suggest using dates in front. 2021, 0321, because then it sorts better. So this is the way that I use naming conventions, because then I also don't need a folder for year, month, and all those crazy things. Okay, so think of your naming conventions, but do take note that you can then go to that version in SharePoint, and I can restore a previous version. So maybe I was on leave this week, and I did see that Karika is on the call. So maybe I was on leave this week, and I've handed over to Karika to go and update all my registers, and she got a bit creative with Excel and broke some of my formulas. Then I can come back on Monday and say, Karika, I'm so sorry, but would you mind if I restore my previous version of the document? Because I'm not able to fix it. So that's the cool thing about versions, is that we can do these things. Karika, don't take offense. I'm really not picking on you. Maybe I am. So let's talk about the versions. Let's do a recap. So same document name replaces the same document. Okay, that's important to know. You can restore previous versions. You can also change the number of versions that it keeps in the background from 500 to 50,000. Okay, I wouldn't go that high, but depending on the business case. And then very importantly, I want to ask you, trust people, trust the technology, use the versions to manage some of that risk that you might have before you start managing permissions. Okay, before you start messing with permissions because you don't trust someone to do the right thing, use the technology to help you build that trust. Okay, because you do have versions. The next thing that I do want to talk about is the library sync. Okay, now a lot of companies is actually switching this off. I'm like, what? But I understand why, okay? And it's because they're not training people. So we're still having complicated environments where we're cutting off users' hands because we don't trust them to do the right thing, because let me think about it. Oh, that's correct. We don't want to spend the money to train them. So if that's the case in your company, then I'm very sorry, but I fight against that. If we train people and invest in our greatest assets, who is our employees, then we'll have less issues in IT, by the way. So stop blaming the platform and stop. If I ever hear you say an end user is stupid, I promise you, I'm a biker girl, remember? We like getting to fights, so don't even go there with me. Okay, so let's talk about the library sync. That library that's behind your team. So when you work in Teams, in your desktop, or whether it's in the web app, of course, it's actually online. Okay, you need to be online to work in Teams with the documents. Many people work in environments like South Africa, where we don't have the bandwidth that you do, and we're not always online. It's not 24/7. Most of us doesn't have fiber at homes. So it really does help to sync the library down so that in some instances you can still walk offline on those documents, and then it'll update again when you're back online. So if you navigate to the SharePoint site, remember that it's going to open in the folder that you were on for the channel. Okay, so navigate back to the main documents library and then sync it, because if you're in a folder and you sync it, it'll only sync that folder, and that's quite silly. So navigate back to the main documents library and then sync it. It's going to sync it down to your Explorer, similar to OneDrive. It also uses files on demand, so you can selectively choose what must be physically stored on the machine and what must just be accessible. And it really works amazing. The reason why, and let's first go one step further. Let me show you what this looks like. So if I've synced that Teams document library down, this is what it looks like in my Explorer view. You'll see it's opened up a new section for my company, the good stuff, separate from OneDrive, but it works exactly the same. You'll see there it uses files on demand and it shows all my channels. And it's also much easier to save documents this way, straight out of where you're working. Just go file, save as, go put it into Explorer, and it's done. It's a lot faster than having to navigate through Teams, because a lot of us works with documents 80% of the time, and the other 20% is talking about documents. Okay, so just put it where it needs to go. The danger with this is the danger with this is that that end user can on their PC in Explorer go and select all those folders and go, delete, I don't want to see this anymore. And what do you think is going to happen? It's going to go right back to SharePoint and it's going to update it and delete those channels. So that's the important thing, and that's what scares people. So, oh no, we're not going to allow the sync because users will go break everything. And I'm like, well, maybe you should train people, okay? Train people, and then there's other couple of things you can do as well to manage that risk, and I'll share that with you next. So very important is that when someone has synced it down to their PC, they have to stop the sync first before they delete that set of folders, okay? Otherwise it goes and it syncs back. So please make sure that your users are aware of this. But it definitely, for me, it's a great help if people can sync that library down. Now let's take a recap on syncing the library. You can sync that to your Explorer, which I think is a big fat win, okay? Remember to sync at library level, not at the folder level, otherwise it syncs one level down. Your changes syncs back to the SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, okay? Always create your channels and subfolders in Teams. I just teach everyone for that. Create it in Teams, and then it'll just sync to obviously SharePoint and your Explorer. I'm going to check those questions in a moment. And so I just make sure that I create my architecture in Teams so that no one misses a point somewhere, because people are creating channels in the Explorer and then it doesn't show in Teams, and then everyone's up in arms because Teams sucks. I'm like, no, sweetie, it's not Teams that sucks. But anyway, so always create your channels and subfolders in the Microsoft Teams side, and it'll sync both ways. And then please stop the sync before removing it from your PC. I want to quickly just see Damien posted something to consider regarding sync. I hit a limitation yesterday. If you enable check-in, check-out on a library and sync that library, then check-in, check-out stops working. Damien, I don't understand the business case though. So I hear what you're saying about check-in, check-out, because the challenge is that people might work on documents offline and then it's going to just sync whoever goes online first. So I'd love to know more about that business case with why you are using check-in, check-out. But of course, there might be one. So please remember to stop the sync before removing it from your PC. Now let's talk about alerts as well. A couple of years ago, because I've written, I think, over 1,000 blogs, believe it or not, because I don't have kids, I have time. So a couple of years ago, I did a blog series called SWAT, okay, SharePoint Weapons and Tactics, and alerts and recycle bin and these things were my favorites, okay, because there's these special tools that we can use to protect our environments. Stop limiting users, people. Use the technology for what it's supposed to do, because you're creating chaos for yourself. So if I look at a team environment, now that I've told you that everyone can edit and delete everything, of course, everyone's running to Teams, they're changing permissions on folders. This one can't edit that. This one can only be read. You're creating chaos for yourself, people. You're creating a separate nighttime job for yourself if you do that, okay? Use the technology to manage that risk. So as soon as a team is created, especially in companies where people are new to this, okay? And believe me, 75% of our employees are not PC literate. I'll take you on about that at any point in time, okay? We can have this discussion. So most people are not PC literate, not because they're dumb, because companies are too lazy to invest in them, okay? Lazy as well when it comes to money. So if you go and you add members to the team, if you're worried about people suddenly deleting stuff, don't go change their permissions. Why don't you go to SharePoint, set up an alert on that library and say, notify me once a week of all the items that got deleted? Because you can restore things, of course. You can also set up an alert and say, let me know if someone else edits a document in this channel or something. So rather use the tool to notify you when things happen than try to limit the users, okay? So use the alerts. It's an incredible tool. Remember to set the alerts up on the level where you want the alert, because if you're in a folder, it's going to set the alerts up inside of that folder, not on the document library level. Let's do a recap about alerts. So I can set up alerts to monitor deleted items, which is pretty cool because that's what everyone is stressing about. I can monitor when someone edits a document that maybe I created or uploaded. Maybe I don't want people to change my document, then go set up an alert. I can set up alerts on libraries and folders and document levels. And then again, trust people, trust the technology, use alerts to manage some of that risk. I'm hoping if I say that enough, it's going to sink in, right? I will get back to the question, peeps. So I just want to check my time. I've still got a couple of things. Permissions is a nightmare, Karika. Nightmare is a nice word for permissions, by the way. Permissions should just be printed on wine bottles. That's what they should do. Okay, so the next thing I do want to talk about is the recycle bin. There's another one of my SWAT tactics. And I want to talk about the recycle bin. And of course, now I've mentioned the alert that you can set up. So you can set up an alert to say, hey, let me know if someone deletes my stuff, okay? Because maybe you're a bit worried about the people that you work with. So your recycle bin keeps items for 93 days on SharePoint, okay? So if you navigate to SharePoint and you go to the recycle bin, it keeps it for 93 days. So set up an alert to every Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, send you a summary for the week, so that if you really get mad at someone, then you can have a glass of wine and you have the whole weekend to get over it so that you don't fire someone. But that means that every 7 days you'll have a notification of deleted items in case there was a mistake, okay? Then you can just go and restore it. No problem. So recycle bin, pretty cool. Been around forever. 93 days to restore items, okay? You can set up an alert on deleted items, remember, which means you can then go and restore your items. Trust people, trust the technology, use your restore to manage some of that risk. Stop cutting users' hands off, use the technology for what it was developed to do. Okay, next up. So SharePoint, I'm going to check the questions in a moment. So we're going to scroll back and go through that in a mo. I've got to check my time because otherwise I'll keep you here all day, people, and I'll just train you everything that I know. So SharePoint Home, and I'm talking about two different things here. I'm also talking about the home site of your team, but I'm also talking about a home site app in Teams. I haven't used this yet. I'm super excited about it. Which means we'll have a little icon in Teams where you can then bring in your whole intranet. I'm talking about communication sites in your intranets, okay? That's been marked as home sites. Really, really excited for this because at the moment, when you add a SharePoint homepage into your team, it strips out the header and like the whole search and all the cool things around it. So that really annoys me. So I'm really, really looking forward to this, and this should be dropping. It's already started dropping some places. I see people, I think the previous session actually presented on that. So, but that's a pretty cool thing for adding your intranet to Teams, which is on SharePoint, by the way. Now, as mentioned, behind your team, there is a SharePoint site. So I can go and add the homepage to that site to Teams as well, because maybe people use that interface quite often. So how do I do that? Is I will go and add a tab, I go to SharePoint and I pick the home site of the existing site behind my team. So that's if you want to use the home site of your team as an extra UI with web parts and things on, okay, which could be quite cool. You can also add any other site, okay? So there you'll see it stripping out my header at the top. Not that you would know that, but my top nav is gone, sadly. So at the moment, I'm repeating it at the bottom with quick links, but you can add any other SharePoint site as well. Remember that the people need to have permissions to it. Teams is not going to apply new permissions to that SharePoint site. That SharePoint site's permission still overrides it. So if I don't have access to the site, but I have access to the team, I won't be able to see the site, if that makes sense. How do I do that? I'll go and add SharePoint, any SharePoint site, and I'll whack the link in there. Okay, so you can add other SharePoint sites as well, which I think is pretty impressive. Okay, let's do a recap. So we spoke about SharePoint, the home page or the home site app. You can access your site from Microsoft Teams. You don't have to go file open in SharePoint. You can add it as a tab. You can add other SharePoint sites as well, which is valuable to the team. And soon, can't wait, the home site app in Microsoft Teams. So I think that's going to be a game changer for like intranets and things. Absolutely, absolutely agree with that statement. Having intranet including in Teams, super cool addition. It's not super cool, it's like 10 times super cool. I'm so excited about it. Okay, so let's talk about web parts. For anyone who's new to SharePoint, because again, remember, sometimes we've forgotten the things that other people still have to learn. If I can tell you what a web part is, if you're not used to SharePoint, think of a SharePoint page as a wall in your house. Think of web parts as windows and paintings and things and little shelves that you can put things on. So web parts are like windows that you can build into walls where you can then surface other things through those, or paintings or cool things like that. So let's talk about the windows quickly that you can add on pages, which means I can add my SharePoint page to Teams and add other web parts there. Pretty impressive, I'd say. So let's take a look at that. If I go to the SharePoint site, if I go and edit the page, there is so many little different web parts that I can add. It's so, so cool. So you can even build out a bigger UI when it comes to that page behind your team, and then add that as a tab. You can also, here's just an example of a page that I built to show different time zones, and then add that page on your team as a tab. Here's another example. So I use SharePoint pages as well to do like policy updates or to inform employees of things. And I add other web parts on there like Stream for video and Yammer and things. Again, that page can be added on Teams, which is what I think like it's pretty amazing. Don't ditch SharePoint just because you're working in the purple place, people. SharePoint's pretty amazing. Okay, so bring that stuff back into Teams and use it. Don't forget that you have all these tools in the background to be able to use. Then also for those that are new to SharePoint, perhaps, SharePoint Lookbook, what a cool place. Okay, so there's lots of templates that you can deploy quickly if you're an admin. Otherwise, ask the admin in your company. But I get so inspired going here because we all run out of ideas, people. It's human nature to just think of the basics. If you ask anyone, tell me like 3 colors, they're going to go red, blue, yellow. I don't know, because that's what we do. If you go to the SharePoint Lookbook, you can go and look at different pages. It actually gives you a breakdown on the left that says what web parts did we use, what did we add there. Here's a blog to go read up more. It's the best training tool ever. Okay, so go check that out. Let's do a recap on web parts. So you can add value by using, for example, news posts on your site and on a page. Add other web parts to bring content and tools together, like Power BI and Yammer and lots of cool things, okay? Lots of cool things. Don't throw away those pages because you can use them very valuably. Okay, other apps. I want to talk about other apps, and I'm not talking about other apps. I'm actually talking about other apps on SharePoint. So I'm actually talking about document libraries, okay? Because we have Microsoft lists now. No, on your team, it is possible to add additional document libraries. There's one library already that sits behind your channels, remember? So behind your channels, there's a folder in a library, but you can have an additional library that works with metadata for another purpose. For example, something I do with a lot of my clients, I know, is that if they migrate from a file server or out of Dropbox and they don't have the time to clean up that stuff, I migrate that stuff straight into an additional library. I call it archive. And then I go and mark that library read only. It's the only time I ever mess with permissions. And then I add it as a tab. So they've got an old archive library where they can find their previous content in that old, horrible nested folder structures. I mark it as read only, and I train people to select a document to move it into a channel if they want to modify. Boom. Okay. So that's adding additional libraries. Again, I'm going to monitor the chat in a moment, everyone. What you have to take note of is if you create a library that uses metadata and views, because how cool is that, by the way? It doesn't always have to be folders. If you add that library to the team, it's not going to display it like that. Okay, so here's a little fix for you to get around that. So there you can see that's what that library looks like in a team. So you'll see it strips out the whole metadata and groupings and everything. It just brings in the documents. But if you want to see the metadata view, then the sneaky way of doing that is go and grab the URL for that view that you created. So maybe you called it group by department or something. Grab the URL and then add it as a website tab. And then look at that cool little metadata view inside of your team. Okay, let's do a recap. Got like so few minutes left. Create other libraries with metadata can be done. Perhaps you need a separate library for an archive migration or something. And then you can add these libraries as tabs on your team. If you want to use the metadata view, add it as a website tab. Works like a charm. Okay, Microsoft lists. It's the last one on my list of cool things I want to talk about. So Microsoft lists as well, in case you didn't know that, is a SharePoint custom list. Okay, so I'll just brag about that. They just made it pretty. Okay, we used to spend a lot of time custom coding the stuff to look like that, and now it's so easy. You know, back in the day, we struggled much more. But Microsoft List, pretty cool thing that was added to Teams. It still is a list. It's a traditional custom list. In SharePoint, you have some templates that you can use. You can create a blank list from scratch. Sometimes if you're new to this, it's easier to just go and create a template and go mess with it first than to create it from scratch. Now, I think what's cool about the lists, of course, is that nice UI that it gives me in Teams. So I don't have to go edit the form. It's got a nice layout. I can just add my content there, and that's pretty cool for me. And then, of course, as well, there's some pre-set up JSON formatting that happens. So that it looks like conditional formatting, where the one's green and the one's blue. That works really well for people that is not that good with adding code or column formatting, if that makes sense. What I do want to say is that inside of the app, inside of Microsoft Lists, you can add more columns there. I have to say, some of those I don't add in lists. Multiple lines of text, there's no way I'll add that on a Microsoft list. So I'll create my columns, navigate to SharePoint, add a multiple line of text, come back and add the rest of the columns here because I don't like the way that it formats it, okay? So, but you can open the list in SharePoint and do additional things. So if you're strong on the SharePoint side, please know that you can still do that. So create the list and you can navigate to SharePoint, you can go move things around and I don't know, do some other cool things. So if I go to SharePoint and I open the settings of that app, and I go to list settings, there's all my columns there. So it's still the same thing. They're just giving you a great UI and a front end to make things easier for you. Okay, so let's do a recap on lists. I'm actually winning on time here. I can't wait to go through all the comments that I've got on the team. So create Microsoft lists from Teams for great form layout, and the column formatting is really, really cool, okay? There's more editing available on SharePoint, and if I have to make a suggestion to you, I do think if you're new to it, create a list on a template. Go see how it works. Go scratch around in the columns on SharePoint. See how it works in the background. And that's a good learning curve, okay? And then you can start creating lists from scratch. I would avoid creating a list from an Excel spreadsheet. And anyone who maybe knows SharePoint back in the day will remember that if you import the Excel spreadsheet, man, it does with it whatever it wants to do with it. Oh, you think this is a date? I'm going to make this money. Oh, this is text. No, it's going to be like numbers. I don't know. So I don't like doing that. I'd rather build it from scratch. But of course, it depends on how good that formatting is on your list and how you want to bring that data in. Okay, so you can definitely do that. Now, believe it or not, so I'm nearly on my 40 minutes, which means we're going to spend a couple of minutes on questions and just hang around and maybe recap something. These are the things that I've covered with you in this session. We spoke about the SharePoint storage, which is the SharePoint site collection. Oh, I spoke about permissions. Okay, we covered version history, the library sync, the alerts, the recycle bin, 93 days, remember. Then the SharePoint Home site app, as well as your SharePoint Home page, which is pretty cool. And that's a good question. I'll go to that in a moment. And then SharePoint Home, web parts, other apps. And then, of course, we spoke about Microsoft lists as well. Before I'm going to start looking, because I get sidetracked, because I've been seeing these things happen in the comments. Before I go there, I do want to remind you of something. So Ubuntu is my favorite African word. It's the Bantu language. And Ubuntu, not the OS people, Ubuntu means I am who I am because of who we all are. Okay, there's nothing more special than the Microsoft community. So there's some of the, I'm a Twitter fan when it comes to technical stuff. So a lot of people aren't, you know, it's Instagram these days for the younger people. But I'm still an Instagram, a Twitter person when it comes to staying up to date with tech. Go follow the right groups, hook up with the community. There's so many incredible communities out there, people out there, members out there that add content. I sometimes in the middle of the night, I'm busy building a Power Automate and then something just doesn't work. And you get to the point where you don't know if it's you or if it's a bug. And then I just go and share a screenshot on Twitter and I go, I don't know, what am I doing? And I promise you, like within minutes across the world, there's people who's prepared to give their inputs or to help me out. So don't dish how amazing the community is, okay? You're not alone. And you don't have to do all of this on your own. So I think that's just important for you to remember. And then before I start going into the questions, I just want to remind you that you can rate this session. You're not going to hurt my feelings, people. That's why there's something called Red One. So I don't care what you say about it. Please rate the sessions. Please rate the sessions of the other speakers as well. And then show the love, as I said. I mean, like tweet things out. Go share what you've learned with these things on the other sessions as well. I will go over to my final slide in a moment, so I'm going to just leave that up for a moment, which means that I'm going to go start scratching through comments. I've seen quite a couple of things happen there. Let me see what's happening. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Apparently, Karika says the Power Platform track has been on fire. Sorry, I've missed that out. Okay, so I like that. Okay, not a question. There's an item in MSFT roadmap that channel renaming will change the name. Oh, yay! That's good to know. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Is it Jari or Jerry? One of the two. So thank you for saying that. Apparently on the roadmap, there is an item that says when you rename, it'll rename the SharePoint folder as well. Not a bad thing. I suppose it's still going to keep, and posted the link as well. Rockstar. So from the roadmap, 72211 feature ID, pretty new one. Me and my customers are waiting for that. I'm very, very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. Then I'm going to just touch base on this again. Damien said something to consider regarding the sync. I hit a limitation yesterday. If you enable check-in, check-out on a library and sync that library, then check-in, check-out stops, okay? It does make sense to me. Why? Because it's not connected online anymore. So you can't physically check out the online document when you're offline, but that is a limitation. So thanks for sharing that, Damien. It is a limitation that people need to take note of. Okay, let's see. So columns and libraries don't show in Explorer, but that makes it hard to go from folders to columns. But I did share that tip with you. After that, Tanya, is that then added as a website tab so you can see the metadata. So that's pretty cool. Then, yeah, permissions is a nightmare, Karika. And then someone shared a screenshot. You can add SharePoint columns in Explorer. Yeah, I know that is pretty cool, right? So I'm not, was she talking about Explorer on? Yeah. Explorer also has more metadata, also been there for years, believe it or not. So you definitely can look at that. But I was referring to adding it at Teams as a tab. So absolutely, Michelle, we're not even going to we don't even have to discuss this. Wine reduces my wine. Okay. For those that doesn't know me, now you know it. Wine reduces my wine. It's one of the cheapest, best fixes in the world. It fixes a lot of my problems. It makes me not shout at customers. Okay. Right click on the column header and File Explorer and click more. Got it? And then you can add more. So thank you for that. Then having an intranet included, absolutely love it. I think it's a great idea. Sadly, what are you doing on my call? Aren't you like sick and tired of me already? I'm sure I always see you on my sessions. You must be so over in my sessions. Fun when Tracy gets excited. I do get excited. I do get excited about these things. Purple Place is built on SharePoint. Yeah, you're right. The purple place. You know this. Listen, I've got a Teams tattoo. We're not going to joke about that. I've got the jersey on, so I can't show you. But I've got a Teams tattoo. I want to see where I've got a Teams tattoo there. I've also got an Apple tattoo in case they take over the world, you know, so I've got like people on my side. I've got a SharePoint tattoo as well, okay, because you've got to have both. I've got a SharePoint and a Teams tattoo because that's how it goes. Okay. Who has the control of recycle bin? Is the owner only or for every member of the group? So Ari, I'm going to speak under correction, but as far as I remember, the last time I checked it, members and owners have the same abilities there because you're actually both in the members group on SharePoint. So that's also a bit dangerous, which means that members can also delete stuff out of the recycle bin. So again, worth going and checking it and just training people. But remember, there's a second stage recycle bin, but only for a short limited time where an admin can restore something that's been deleted. So I would suggest setting that alert so that at least you know that something was deleted. And if that person then permanently deletes it, the admin can restore it. When you create a list in Teams, does it add the list in the SharePoint site of that team? Absolutely does. So if you go open in SharePoint, you'll see I've got to be very careful now when I say things like that. Let's just quickly page back. I just want to see how it links to it. So one momento. So you'll see there I said open in SharePoint. Do you see there that the list settings, it sits on the existing site. So that app is built on that SharePoint site. Okay, just to recap that. Let me just get my last slide up. Okay, where are we? Blah, 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 blah. Can I connect Power BI as a list? Power BI, can I connect Power BI a list as a source? So Jan, there was actually a great session, or there's sessions happening at the moment that Mark Cashman and them are doing to show how you easily add Power BI with a Microsoft list as a source, if that's what you're referring to, because yes, absolutely you can do that. Power BI, the Microsoft list is still a little, I'm going to say database, and then a lot of people are going to lose their crazy marbles, but it's still a data source. Okay. Okay, user itself can restore items deleted by itself and team owner admin. That's interesting to know. So thanks for sharing that, Jerry. So user itself can restore items. I don't know. I've done some other tests where everyone could see deleted items. So I would go and test that again, but thank you for that comment. I think 40 minutes is enough to Tracy. You know that. Yes, you can use SharePoint. Thank you for answering that as well. Sorry, I'm just going through from the top. Yeah, Hilton. South Africans for the win, people. So that's a good thing we don't have a great government, because we would take over the world. That's maybe why they're keeping us up a bit. So I'm so glad, Karika, that you love the community. It is the better. The community is my family, people, absolutely. So, and again, I might pronounce this. It's Ari or Ari, maybe I would pronounce it Ari, but that's me being Afrikaans. They did ask for our presentations, but I always share my presentations on SlideShare as well. So if you go to my blog, tracyvanderschyff.com, you'll see there's an about page and it's got a link to my SlideShare. So I normally just wait for the conference to load it first, and then I'll load the presentation as well. So you absolutely will get hold of it. Yeah, Tanya, you're right. So not an Explorer if people sync. Yeah, not if you work from the Explorer side. But remember, if the document's already loaded, then the metadata is there. So when you do use metadata on certain libraries, make sure that they load it first in the team with the metadata, and then you can edit the document in Explorer. You don't have to change the metadata again, I think. Okay. Made a report which collected information from 3 different lists. Those list items were connected to each other in Power BI data model. And based on that data, I made different visualizations in Power BI report. That sounds like an answer to me, but that is correct. So thank you for that, Cherie. So Ari said, cool, that's me at the end of my list. Is there no more else? Come on, speak to me, peeps. We've still got a couple of minutes. I've got like, I don't know, 7 minutes I can squeeze out of you before the next speaker wants to take over the screen. Any questions from anyone? Any feedback they want to give me? Did this help you? Is there, I mean, even out of that 10 things, if there's one thing that I said that made you go, oh, I've forgotten about that, then my job here is done. Brahm, I don't think people know Brahm. Brahm's up on my shelf there. So I've got a sheep in my company. He's an intern sheep, and he travels the world with me. But at the moment, he's stuck in a shelf. That's what Brahm is. He's been demoted to a mentor sheep. It was so nice to have you on the call, Tanya. We must definitely catch up. I'm going to come visit you in Merita soon in Norway, by the way, as soon as my government allows me to leave on an aeroplane. Okay, let's see. Cool. Michelle, in your opinion, do you think the adoption of Teams would have been successful? Have you seen that meme where they say, who drives digital disruption in your company? Is it the CEO, the CIO, or COVID? It's COVID, people. But you know what? Sometimes things have to happen to force the hand, because I was great with Teams before it. I was just happy it was in place already. But it definitely does. I think necessity always drives need. I mean, that's an important thing to remember, is people don't always see the need of something until something happens, okay? So it's like people won't know, well, this is going to be a bad example because it's worse in South Africa, but people won't understand why would they have an alarm system until someone's broken into their house, okay? So necessity does drive need. Sadly, out of interest, how do you explain the difference between team and communication sites to customers? Don't apologize. So the easiest way that I can explain it, in the shortest way, which I can't do because I don't do short, is that when you look at the UI, a team site has a left navigation, a comm site don't. That's the first biggest thing. So a communication site has a bigger like estate value for presenting content, where a team site's more of a working site for me. The one has a left navigation, the one has a top navigation. The other very big difference, sadly for me, for team sites versus communication sites, is that when you create a team site, it creates a Microsoft 365 group linked to it. That's important to know. So it's created that security group, that Azure security group, where a comm site doesn't have that. It's got those 3 blank members, owners, visitors, SharePoint groups, and you can add people into that. So that's another big thing. And then also important to know, and I don't know what all the differences are. There are small feature differences between comm sites and team sites, where comm sites has a bit more like bells and whistles when it comes to like adding it now as a home site app and Teams, and some of the, I'm going to incorrectly call it publishing features, but you know what I mean. So there's a couple of cool extra things. But at the end of the day, all of them are SharePoint and all of them are amazing. Okay. So let's see, do you know of any in-person conferences this year that you're going to? I'm not leaving the country, Tanya, so that's a problem. I can't leave. We've not even got vaccinations yet, by the way. I'm probably going to have to buy it on black market. So if anyone has like connections for me, DM me on social media. I need a vaccine. So I don't. Hi all, thank you so much for attending. You're welcome. I'm going to have to jump off. They're going to kick me off very, very soon. Let me quickly see. Thank you. You're so welcome, Anya. Enthusiasm is infectious. Believe me, I get like excited about stuff on my own, so that's always good. By the way, you do, Patrick. I noticed that your 3D lobby screen. Look at you. Look at you doing cool stuff. Okay. So then I think last thing, and it's pink and red, by the way. Get your facts straight, Patrick. Pink and red, big difference. Let's quickly just share one last final thing in case you missed it. And then I'm going to go off screen and allow the next person to join. So there we go. Thank you for attending. There's my blog link. There's also my YouTube link. I do a lot of community and training and stuff. I think you're pretty much like amazing. Thank you for all the questions. I really, really enjoyed the session. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference, man. I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. Let's quickly see while I'm busy going off the screen. Permissions is a nightmare, but it doesn't have to be, Anya, because we're making it worse. We're making it worse because we don't trust people. I'm sorry to say it, it's a true story. Oh, I don't trust Peter. Let me take his permissions away. Look at that serve you in life. So how do you encourage or recommend learning latest tips of Microsoft Teams in an organization where all employees are always busy? Learning culture, I think, Fabian, is a different topic for another day, and I've written quite a lot about it, by the way. So I don't think the 2 minutes I have is, I've got to allow the other speaker to come up. So maybe just, I don't know if you're on Twitter, maybe like put that out on Twitter. I'd love you, and just tag me in on it. So please don't send direct messages as well, people. If I can really ask you, because so many people send direct messages, rather send a post on LinkedIn or Twitter and tag me into it, because then other community members can also contribute. So from my side, thank you very much, everyone. You have an incredible day all the way from sunny South Africa, and stay awesome and enjoy and keep on learning.